2021 was a strange year. One of the benefits of making my end of the year roundup videos late into January is that I get to see other people's takes on the year before putting together my own. Sometimes there's things that I got really into early into the year that I forget about later on because a lot can happen in a single year, and they show up in those videos, so I go, oh yeah, that existed, I should mention that. With 2021, the general sentiment that I kept seeing around was that 2021 felt like a repeat of 2020 for most people. As I'm putting this video together, my country's leaving a lockdown. I still remember us doing exactly the same thing early into the year before too. In both cases, most of the especially strict rules came in near the end of the year prior. There's definitely a strong feeling of the global situation being cyclic. For me, my own living situation got a drastic change in the past year. I finally moved to a proper apartment of my own. That alone puts a very different spin on things. But we're here to play and talk about video games, so let's stop getting stuck in this odd loop and start talking about those. So you ever feel like you get stuck in a loop? Well, I've got the game for you. Loop Hero was the big surprise hit early into the year before everyone seemed to forget about it a month or two later. I almost really liked it. There's a lot of cool ideas presented in a neat, unassuming title. I say almost because Loop Hero, at least for me, is a game that is stuck between two sweet spots. On one hand, I'd like it if Loop Hero was a little less active. If you could set up your tiles and equipment with maybe a little bit more automation and combat moved a bit faster, maybe put some of the heavier setup in the early game and then just let the game do its thing until the end of the run. It would make it a very comfortable, idle game. On the other hand, I'd like it if Loop Hero was a little bit more active. Get some real control over combat, make equipment cause various effects for more interactions that require switching between builds. Maybe have some base offensive and defensive stances to switch between, abilities with loop-long cooldowns. Maybe even allow you to flip tiles between an active and inactive state that both interact with their surroundings in unique ways. As it is, it's not inactive enough that you don't have to constantly hover over it, but at the same time it's not active enough to feel any satisfaction over having to constantly control the game. But it is close enough to both for it to be frustrating after a while, at least for me. And I'm someone who does play idle games more than I probably should. So after a while I got the itch to play another game where you loop around a map with a hero to gain power and riches, one that is a lot more active and enjoyable. And that game was Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I never really invested time into this game before. I missed out on that era of PC gaming. So I can say that without prior nostalgia for the series or that game in particular, that Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is absolutely still one of the greats. And that the gameplay loop still hits a sweet spot of thinking up a course of action and moving without thinking. This doesn't mean that I hate Loop Hero or anything. I think it can be iterated on or deviated from in interesting ways. For a first attempt at a game like this, it's pretty solid. But I got the feeling that I got everything I was going to get out of it very early on into it, and the game would just keep going and going. And since we're on the subject of a large amount of time just vanishing, it took me several years to get through Danganronpa. Last year I finally did it. I beat the video game, and even now I'm still conflicted about it. I like what Danganronpa tries to do thematically. There's similar messages towards how Japan treats its young people as Battle Royale if you read between the lines. It's also a lot more blunt about this, taking the loss of childhood even more literally as the kids are completely robbed of theirs before being pressured into ending each other's lives, and adding the extreme blunt point of there being no future for you once you get out of school. That after all that time of being propped up as the future of the country, of being exceptionally gifted and important, the real world outside of school being a futureless hell that doesn't care about what lies they told you before, yeah, I can get behind that. And actually, with the explosive popularity of Ado's Useva the past year, I'm definitely not the only one who can get behind this sentiment. What I couldn't get behind though was the characters. Danganronpa felt like the cast wasn't written for the game that they're in. Most of the cast members were useless at best, adding very little to the investigations or just the setting's writing in general. And the class trials hinged on a character dynamic fitting an ace attorney courtroom more than it did a roundtable debate that the game focuses on. It's the character writing that just blocked me from playing more of it, even as the themes and the subtext hidden under the vinyl sheet that is the text kept me from uninstalling it. And it's not just the side characters, I actually really resented the main character after a while because he's so incredibly dense and stupid and just wouldn't get what is going on even as it is happening, while the game expects the player to know. Shortly after finally beating Danganronpa, I tried Danganronpa II, a game I pretty much played through in a month. Absolutely nobody in the cast was as bad as anyone in the first, unless it's intentional. Even the main character finally would arrive at like the same conclusions as the player would be able to with the information that is given to them. They're not as stupid as the main character in the first game. And to top it off, the character actually seemed to have changed his mind about several of the thematic meanings he pushed in the first game, so the game itself ended up working as a meta rebuttal towards some of the more bitter aspects of the first game. It's very fascinating. One of the things that I especially liked is that other characters will interrupt you and they'll actually make it more like a roundtable discussion rather than you constantly being the only person in the room who is correct. Something that the game even seems to mock at some points regarding how the first game handled it. I'm very curious about the third game and I'm probably going to play that this year, but first I want to get through Ultra Despair Girls and the anime. Ultra Despair Girls I have started. The gameplay isn't too great, it's kind of a jank Resident Evil 4 with just the pistol, but the writing is very good. It's just that the gameplay is not near the level of the writing of the game itself. And the anime, I've heard very, very interesting things about it, let's put it that way. Coming from one game with a unique art style and a non-standard meta-narrative, now's as good time as any to discuss Cruelty Squad. I actually don't know what to say about it except it's very good. And it's hard to even convey why it's as good as it is, because every individual aspect of it is one that under normal circumstances I'd call a deal breaker. It's not every year that you play a game that ignores most well-known game design rules and just does its own thing to this extent. It's an ugly game that is resentful about where the world is at, throwing barbs at both gig and consumer culture as well as the player. It has the least helpful reload input of any shooter that I've played, where it expects you to hold down the reload button while you pull down the mouse fast enough to go under a deep threshold. It's not interested in a lot of general beliefs regarding level design or color choice, and it's still a satisfying and interesting game that is worth having experienced at least once. It's nice to still get games like this that experiment and stand out from the crowd to this extent, but it's even better when you see it gets received as well as it has been. There is still room in this industry for games like Cruelty Squad, and audiences will accept non-standard and strange games. Stuff like that is always really nice to see for me. And on the opposite side of things, it's nice to see Capcom repeat history again, taking Resident Evil into a more action-oriented space with Resident Evil Village. You just have to respect Capcom for opening the first new Resident Evil entry after the past few years of Chris Redfield memes with him kidnapping a baby. I was going to hold off on playing this until I got a better PC because I wasn't too sure about the performance on the PlayStation 4, but a friend really insisted that I borrowed his physical copy of the game on the PS4, just like I'd insisted he borrow my Resident Evil 2 remake copy a few years ago. And I'm glad I did play it, because Village is definitely up there as one of the better entries in this franchise. Which is saying a lot, because a lot of the entries in this franchise are some of the best games made, in my opinion. Though I still look forward to replaying it with better frame rate and nicer visuals on the PC in the future. While I didn't upgrade my PC this year, I did make one hardware upgrade. I got myself a nice tablet to read manga on. The past few years I've mostly been reading manga using Tachiyomi on my phone. I don't really like reading digitally on a PC, and a phone, while not perfect, still feels a lot nicer than a big monitor located at a desk. So a tablet was the obvious next step. It's such a nice upgrade that I've been thinking about rereading a lot of major manga that I've enjoyed on my phone, just to experience them in a nicer way. Though I did keep up with some new manga too. Terrarium in Drawer is an anthology series by Ryoko Kui, the mind behind Dungeon Meshi. It explores a lot of absurd concepts and ideas, usually in a chapter or two, often with a strangely grounded feeling to them. It tends to take a while between Dungeon Meshi chapters, so I figured I should read some of her other works in between releases, and I'm glad that I did this. Because this also is a good example of some of the stuff that would later lead to Dungeon Meshi, with some of the stories revolving around weird food. But it's also interesting in its own right. Like, my favorite story was the one with the actor on trial for the murder of a screenplay writer, where they argue he did it as the character he was playing and not as himself, so that he cannot be tried for the crime since the fictional setting in which the character lives ended the moment their god, the writer of the screenplay, died, meaning that the entity that committed the murder no longer exists within the mind of the actor, who, as such, has to be innocent. It's absurd, and I love it. One of the big surprise hits for me the past year has been Dan Da Dan, an incredibly cool manga about the relationship between a nerdy boy, a tough girl, and the aliens and ghosts that get between them. It has pretty much all of my favorite action scenes in manga the past year. I appreciate how it's using the aliens to represent the unnatural lifestyle and expectancies of the male-dominated workforce, and the long-lasting emotional grudges of the female-dominated lingerings of the afterlife. Both of them putting societal complications and strains on their relationship as the girl develops psychic powers and the boy gets haunted by the Turbo Granny. It's one of my favorite things in Shonen Jump right now. And the creator seems to be part of the same creative corner of Shonen Jump that has been giving us works like Chainsaw Man, Spy X Family, and Ayashimon. All works that are worth looking into for anyone remotely interested in manga. Also, I mentioned this one in the Samurai Western video already, but please read Renjo Desperado. It's not that well known, but I like it a lot. One of the bigger surprises for me this year was Batuk. I quite like martial arts and sports-focused manga, especially if there's research done that's grounded in reality to represent a sport. It's interesting how much you can learn about various sports just through manga and anime over the years. Like how I kind of know the rules and logic behind a good number of competitive sports I'd otherwise know nothing about, like basketball, baseball, and boxing. Batuk is a batshit insane manga about capoeira. It has one of the most chilling intros I've ever seen for a sports manga. Just look at these few pages, that's really how the manga starts off. I thought nothing was going to top the start of Major, where the protagonist's father is accidentally killed in the field through a freak accident, but here we are. What follows this intro is an over-the-top series of gang war exploits, kind of like a less horny History's Strongest Disciple Kenichi, with some extremely fighting game win quote looking page layouts. It's great stuff. Around the same time that I was starting to get into Batuk, the Slayers Omnibus hardcover started coming out. If you haven't heard about this yet, the publisher behind these, J Novel Club, are retranslating and republishing Slayers. They put out a statement saying that this localization effort is a labor of love. They don't expect dramatic sales for a work this old. They believed that it was criminal that the original Slayers novels were left behind in the state that Tokyopop had abandoned them in. So we're getting new translations for the old novels, followed by the rest of the work finally getting released in the West. It's hard not to support something like that, so I ended up buying the first volume. Before this, I'd never read a light novel before, unless Legend of the Galactic Heroes counts? I'm actually not sure. I was deathly afraid that the translation would be as bad as the old Slayers anime was, where there's still memes about major mistranslations to this day. Or the dub Lena, who doesn't sound like the same character at all, like a whole layer has been sanded off as she talks as selfish as she acts. Something that doesn't really fit next to how Hayashibara Megumi portrays her. Thankfully, the translation work of the light novel actually got Lena exactly right. So even counting subtitles and an official dub, this felt like the first time I experienced Lena inverse properly in English. A good thing too, since the entire story is told from her perspective. The light novels are a lot less slapstick and much less over the top. In the first 3 novels, Lena doesn't even completely level a town in a single explosive spell, and the first novel is actually pretty much the first season of the anime. But they're still enjoyable, and I intend to get the rest of the run when they release them physically. The real big surprise, though, has been Yojosenki. I've heard things here and there about light novels getting censored with their Western releases, and the publisher for the saga of Tanya the Evil, Yen Press, has a number of things in their library I'm interested in reading in the future, so I figured, why the hell not? Of everything I could find at a glance in their library, this felt like the work they'd most likely censored with what I knew about it. And if they did fuck it up, I wasn't too invested in Yojosenki either way, so it's all good. And the result is surprising. So I never did watch the anime, and only read bits of the manga in preparation of reading the light novel. And I can confirm that Yen Press likely doesn't cut anything from their works. Most of the story of censorship and cutting content that reached me was related to 7 Seas Entertainment anyway, but the biggest surprise is the kind of work that Tanya the Evil light novel series is. I had to go over a few episode plot summaries for the anime and talk about it with people familiar with the anime, and from that and what I got out of the manga, the light novel strikes me as a very different beast. I've seen Tanya pop up on a list of works where the isekai element could be removed in order to improve it, since it barely factors into it anymore after a while, and that's fascinating to me, having read the first volume of the light novel. In the novels, Tanya never stops mentally keeping a separation between who they are internally and externally. The logic and thoughts are all still the salaryman who was shoved in front of a train. All the bad stuff, externally, happens to Tanya. There's a strong dissociative element to the internalization of the situation that she's in, or he's in. Either way, Tanya compartmentalizes his internal thoughts and her external experiences between the two identities. Tanya is calculative, always thinking about every situation from a cold economical perspective. They don't think about lives or friends or soldiers, they think in numbers and how they can be exploited or deducted. They don't believe in gods or camaraderie, they believe in the Chicago School of Economics, how to get the best results out of a percentage of usable idiots under their command. And it's pretty important for the separation to be there, since most of the problems within the works, at least so far, have been about individuality. The salaryman still believes in his original identity and believes in the freedom of his own expression above everything else. Every action he chooses is to assert his own individual strength. Ironically, most of his actions have him keeping up an image of something that he's not in order to attain more freedom. A professional soldier. The distance between what he is and isn't even being doubled by him pretending to be a little girl pretending to be a professional soldier. On top of this, the computational orb that he possesses, a literal miracle, overrides his rational thoughts upon use, forcing religious prayer and belief to take over, going so far as to erase his memories and thoughts after the fact. So the one tool that Tanya has at their disposal to fight back and put themselves above everyone else as a distinguished individual also robs them of their own person. With this difference between the internal and external, the rebellion against God plays a much more logical role than if it wasn't there. This dispassionate, sociopathic, individualistic Tanya is not the one I see get posted online. The one I see get posted online is more a frenzied maniac. If it reminds me of anything, it's American Psycho, the novel, not the movie. Actually having to make this distinction between the movie and the novel because they're also widely different makes the comparison only feel that much stronger to me. I already ordered the rest of the volumes. What started as a test before moving on to other things actually became the main point of fascination now. The Tanya light novel can get extremely dry at times, but it's one of the more fascinating things I've read in a very long time. And I normally don't read anime books, I read normal weirdo fantasy and science fiction or dumb wrestler clown world biographies. It's been a good year for me in general. Last year's video didn't end on the best of notes. I'd been trying to get unstuck from a bad situation in my life, one that I'd been trying and failing to get unstuck from for about a decade. And this past year was finally the year that I got out of it. It didn't make things automatically great or easy, Shortly after moving into my own place, I ended up going through an extremely low energy phase. Like, no matter what I did, it was hard to stick to it. In hindsight, I guess that's normal, just burnout from years and years of constant stress. Without the constant fears or agitation, my body and mind could finally accept it's time to rest and cool off. And it didn't really like all these ideas for activities that I was pushing at it. For the first time in my life, I have a regular sleeping pattern, covering the right amount of hours without hugely oversleeping. Occasionally, old memories and thoughts resurface and I get to give them the space that I never could in the past. All in all, I'm in a much better space than I've been for an extremely long time. It's not perfect, just last month neighbors 2 floors down started renovation at their apartment, hammering and drilling nonstop for weeks without a break. But it beats dealing with a drug-addicted roommate stealing everything he can get his hands on, or a mouse infestation started by another roommate. I'm finally in a position where I can both focus on where I am now and think about the future, rather than trying to escape both the present and the past. This did make it difficult making this video. I always keep a list of things that I got into, manga I've read, movies I've seen, games I've finished, books I've read, things like that. But this year, even looking at those lists felt strange. Pre-move and post-move feel so different. Most of my memories from before moving feel like they happened a much longer time ago, even though it's less than a full year ago. So seeing some of the major things I got into at the start of the year, it feels like something that should be from a list from the year before, at the soonest. Even some of the things on my list from shortly after moving, before I got the place fully furnished, feel very distant to me now. Like, I watched The Raid, and the recent Mortal Kombat movie, and Knives Out, and all of that feels like it's much longer ago than it actually is. I do highly recommend Knives Out, by the way, it's great. I guess I got into Hololive this year through Calliope Mori's Off With Their Heads. Even though at this point I mostly think of Aqua playing Apex Legends or Hosho Marin being Hosho Marin if I think about Hololive these days. My sense of time is off and off, but never quite like this. There's a couple of things I quickly want to mention before I do end the video though. I don't want this video to be extremely long, so I didn't give them their own space, but this was also the year I finally watched and enjoyed Twin Peaks and Firewalk with Me, as well as Made in Abyss and ReZero. All works where I feel like I would have liked to watch them earlier, but I don't know if I could have handled them as I was for the longest time. Especially Firewalk with Me and ReZero. Those made me think back to some moments in my life that I needed to take some time to digest afterwards. Not like I've been in those exact scenarios, but the frame of mind, the space some of those feelings came from, unfortunately I get that. It's also something I can relate to when I see it as something that I'm no longer experiencing. It's something I remember feeling, but it's not part of me anymore, and that's a good feeling to have. If you made it to this point, I'd like to thank you for watching and sticking with me for all these years. Let's make the next one a good one. The next video is going to be Saga again. It's finally time to cover Saga Frontier, and I have a lot to say about that one, more than I thought I would. Anyway, thank you for watching. See ya.